I recently attended a pro-Palestine rally in Baltimore, and it didn't go exactly the way I expected. No, I didn't get arrested or shot at, but I hope this video will give a glimpse into exactly what goes on at these events. Are the vast majority of protesters here regular citizens or radical activists? Are they marching with informed purpose or joining a bandwagon they know little about? Are they motivated by a desire for equality, human rights, and justice? Or are they supportive of anti-Semitic and anti-American terrorism? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than it seems. Revolution in our lifetime. The first noteworthy thing about this protest is the diversity of its participants. Attendees were from every race, ethnicity, religion, and age group I can think of, including Jews. In fact, I was told about this event by and attended with my Jewish friend. Of course, diversity doesn't prove anything by itself, but it does demonstrate some amount of interracial cooperation atypical of your average anti-Semitic hate movement. But listen to this chant. Clearly this group is at least led by some rather radical activists. They hold ideologies and positions more extreme than mine, and that's saying something. A group of activists made an effigy of Joe Biden, seen here in his dark Brandon texture. Genocide Joe does look a lot more badass and competent here than he was probably meant to be portrayed. I personally believe Biden is just listening to the polls and triangulating the median American voter's policy preference. The average American is more sympathetic to Israel than Palestine, but wants the fighting to stop. These protesters are far left of average. In fact, they'll probably stay home on election day and blame everyone but themselves when Trump gets back into office and withdraws what little humanitarian aid and pressure against the West Bank settlements Biden's been able to muster up so far. The event began with various speakers. The rally leaders would like you to know that they are anti-imperialists, anti-capitalists, and revolutionaries, and they'll demonstrate that scientific socialist and Marxist revolutionary spirit by ensuring Democrats lose to the Republicans in 2024. Of course, the speakers themselves are not necessarily representative of the crowds they speak to. You can tell by the amount of applause following each bold declaration which ones were the most popular. A common theme between the speakers was the designation of Israel as a settler colonial project. Many of the speakers no doubt believe the state of Israel has no right to exist and that all of its lands should be returned to the Palestinian population. There was no elaboration what would happen to the Jews living on that stolen land. Many of the speakers reiterated the distinction between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, often referring to universal human value. By and large, they compared the current conflict to what they consider the worst genocide in modern history, namely the Holocaust. There was no mention of the Russia-Ukraine war, and I would be interested to learn how many of the audience supports each side or neither. I suspect neither would be the most popular position. On the other hand, whereas the speakers vehemently denied any accusations of anti-Semitism, they were not as quick to distance themselves from Hamas. Of course, Hamas's actions have often been brought up as a concern troll or distraction from the ongoing humanitarian disaster precipitated right now by Israel. Do we really need to preempt all our concerns for Palestinian civilians by condemning Hamas for the umpteenth time? Well, as you can see here, it might go a little bit beyond that. Resistance against occupation is a human right. Unconditionally support Palestine's resistance plus liberation. I wonder what resistance they're referring to. One of the speakers even explicitly said, "I salute Hamas," and that was met by no boos. I can't speak for the rest of the crowd, but I personally think you can understand terrorism and violent resistance to be an inevitable consequence against repression without endorsing that terrorism, especially when it gets killed over 40,000 of the people the resistance claims to fight for. And here near the bottom is a Pan-African nationalist banner, and a protest against the Baltimore Police Department, who apparently train with IDF forces. There were also calls for intifada, which literally means uprising. Intifada is a call not necessarily for violence, but for civil disobedience or other strong resistance to occupation. And here it says US hands off Yemen, referring to attacks by the Houthi rebel group against military and civilian vessels in the Red Sea associated with the United States or Israel. The death toll, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, has reached 30,000. This number doesn't distinguish between combatants and civilians, but 2/3 of the dead are women and children. It also doesn't include all the people trapped under rubble or otherwise missing, the vast majority of whom are no doubt dead. And the final question is, did they ever chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free"? Yes, they did, but I didn't catch it on video. Generally, though, this slogan doesn't tell us much about whether the protester wants freedom for the Palestinian nation in general, or more specifically, a single state solution with either Palestinian representation or equal representation. Overall, I've been fairly critical of the optics of this protest, but that doesn't mean I don't see value in it. I did attend it after all. It's important to remember two important points when judging mass movements. One, you represent the ideology you're protesting in favor of. Anything you say or do reflects well or poorly on you and anybody who interacts with you, including pedestrians, police, and politicians. Two, you can never expect either purity or perfection from such a large coalition of diverse peoples. The point is to put your differences aside and unite for a single purpose. And when your purpose is ending a situation under which over 500,000 people are now in the midst of a famine, those differences really start to matter less and less.